Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
This is an island surrounded by water, big water, ocean water. Trust me, I'm like a smart person. I'm very consistent. I'm a very stable genius. I had the best words. Tolerated. I know words. Mike Pounds. I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation. But there's no better word than stupid. Anonymous, really anonymous. I'm very highly educated. One of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water. Had the best words. God bless the United States.
Around the nation, DYT Nation, welcome to the show. I'm, of course, Jeff Waldorf. Probably already know that. Okay, anyway. Weird intros, as always. Weird and always slightly awkward. That's the way how we that's how we do this on the show. That's the way we do things here. Weird and slightly awkward. Anyway, we got a good show for you guys today. A lot of stuff here on this Wednesday. So, we'll get to it. We've got a little bit of a Kushner problem in the White House. That's not me saying it. I mean, it was, but it's also not me saying it. We got Donald Trump's allies that are not happy with Trump's son-in-law. That's a fun story. I love it. We also have another hardcore Trump person now abandoning the president and saying that he should drop out. Ooh, drama. Lots and lots of drama on today's show. We got Kayleigh McEnany and her ridiculous defense of Donald Trump when it comes to intelligence briefings. We all know, of course, the president does not read those briefings. But Kayleigh McEnany is going to come around and say, oh, no, he absolutely reads them. And look, that's going to be a fantastic story. It's going to be a lot of fun. We also have hypocrisy in that story, by the way, and it's going to be I can't wait to get to it. It's probably my favorite story. We also have a Trump hotel that failed a hygiene check during COVID. Shocker. Everybody, this is my shocked face. See how surprised I am? Yeah. And then we've got some good news. Yesterday we had some primaries. Didn't turn out well in the primaries. However, we do have a good news when it comes to Oklahoma. They just passed a ballot initiative that will help hundreds of thousands of people in their state. So we're going to talk about that as well. So, yeah, man, love it. Lots of stuff here. All right. Anyway. Okay. Before we dive into these stories, I want to ask you to please like and share the stream if you're on YouTube. Also share if you're on Facebook. Like our page if you're on Facebook. Hey, that's always good too. And hey, we're on Twitch. I know I've said before that, yeah, we're on Twitch, but it's been a little irregular when it comes to our streaming there. But we are on Twitch, and we're currently streaming today. And I plan on streaming the show from now on. I worked out some little bit of technical end user issues. I know that sounds dirty, but problem apparently existed between the keyboard and chair, and that is now fixed. And so now we're able to stream the show on Twitch. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, Twitch, Jeff Waldorf on Twitch. So yeah, man, check that out. All right. Anyway, hey, and sometimes I will game every once in a while, so that's fun. All right. Anyway, let's dive in. Let's get to the first story here. Apparently, Donald Trump's White House has a little bit of a Jared problem. And of course, by that I mean Jared Kushner. It appears that Donald Trump's allies are in a panic over Trump's disastrous polling numbers, and they're looking for somebody to blame, and that person, of course, is Jared Kushner. Uh, so now, in interviews with the American Spectator, Amber Athey, conservatives who work with the White House are now accusing Jared Kushner of sabotaging Donald Trump's presidency, whether through malice or total incompetence. I love it. As the White House turns. My vote, of course, my vote is for incompetence. Because, look, there's nothing better that the Trump family does. I should say there's nothing the Trump family does better than to display complete incompetence. Look, I remember reading stuff about Jared Kushner and how not only is he a slumlord, but he's also not very smart, and a lot like Donald Trump. And of course, Jared Kushner is married to Ivanka. That's part of the reason why he's in that family to begin with. Actually, that is the main reason why he's in that family to begin with, but I digress. And it is kind of ironic, right? When you look at the family dynamic, especially like, oh, Ivanka's daddy's girl. And then, daddy's like, oh, if she wasn't my daughter, I'd totally date her. And it's ironic to see that she has married someone that was almost described to be almost like Donald Trump, at least when it comes to stupidity and incompetence, as well as bluster. And so we'll get into that in the story later on. But I want to I want to give you some of these fantastic quotes here from the story. Trump has a Jared problem, one conservative tells Athey. Jared is a total fuck up. Everything he touches turns to lead. I love it. God, I love it. And look, where's the lie, right? No lies detected. Because, look, Kushner has no idea what he's doing. Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, I mean, they bring nothing to the table. He and Ivanka are about as useful as a knit condom. Okay? Deeply, deeply unqualified to do anything that they're tasked to do. And look, when's the last time you heard Ivanka come out and say anything? It had to have been a couple of months ago. And of course, as soon as she says something, she's 100% panned. Because what she says is usually pretty vapid. I remember a video of her trying to speak to world leaders. And she'll like come in and butt in and be like, oh yeah, totally. I'm pretending to be a smart person right now, even though I have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. But hey, don't I look good? This is what we have. And you wonder why the White House is falling apart, right? And I don't mean so in a structural sense, although there is some evidence of that as well. But I mean in a political sense. This administration is just it's a dumpster fire on wheels. What that is. All right. So now, another conservative who recently attended an immigration briefing with Kushner, and this goes to, of course, how unqualified he is, said that they were shocked about how little he knew about immigration policy. Oh, this is a good quote. Quote, he presents as someone very knowledgeable and in the know until he faces questions. They explain, he goes off the record or on deep background so people don't realize he's a fucking idiot. Man, who does that remind you of? Good question. Good question. Look, Donald Trump, I love how, Donald Trump will go and be like, I know more than the generals. I know more about anything than anybody ever in this world. Yeah, I mean, he says pretty much insert, anything into that sentence. And it's about what Donald Trump says. Like, nobody knows about healthcare as much as I do. I know everything about healthcare, more than any of the doctors and the nurses. I should have been a doctor. You know that? I should have been a doctor. I've got great genes. My uncle, Dr. John Trump, he's works at MIT. He's a great scientist, and it's just in my blood. It's in my genes. I should have done that instead of become president. Oh my God, he's a fucking moron. He's a moron. And look, Kushner is exactly like that. Fuck ups and all. And yet Donald Trump has placed him in a lot of high positions. Again, he's supposed to be overseeing peace in the Middle East. You put Kushner in charge of that one. And Kushner has his own issues, of course, financial, conflicts of interest going on there, trying to get money from, I think, Qatar or the UAE to try to finance his disastrous investment in a building in New York and just all this stuff, right? That makes him 100% unqualified and compromised when it comes to actually doing real foreign policy like he's supposed to. And so he's the last person that needs to be in any sort of position of power. And yet Donald Trump puts him there. Why? Well, one part is, of course, loyalty, right? Jared Kushner, of course, is considered to be loyal because he's part of the family. He's married to Ivanka. And so it's about trust. The only people that Donald Trump tends to trust are people who are loyalists, again, like his daughter and son-in-law. And, of course, you guys know how much Donald Trump loves his daughter. But I already touched on that. Nonetheless, a lot of these conservatives that are around them that are working with the White House are saying, what are you doing letting Jared Kushner run all this stuff? He's a moron. He's terrible at his job. And the main worry, of course, is he's going to get not only us killed in the election, right? Or you, I should say, but us, the rest of us. It's not just going to be destruction at the top of the ticket. And this is what they're worried about. It's going to be destruction all the way down the ticket. They're worried about Republicans in the Senate losing the Senate, losing their seats. And then, of course, Democrats coming in and keeping the House, getting the presidency and the Senate. They're deeply, deeply worried about that. And look, the way that right now the polling is going, and I can understand that, if you're skeptical of the polls, obviously, as, we are still a little bit far out and not every poll is accurate. I know all the caveats and everything, so I shouldn't have to continue to repeat that. But nonetheless, I mean, so far, if everything stays the same, then yeah, it's looking like it's going to be a blowout, an absolute blowout. But here's the thing, right? Donald Trump himself is super lazy. He doesn't actually want to run things, doesn't actually want to work, which is why Kushner is doing all this stuff. Even Kushner has started to take over Donald Trump's campaign instead of Brad Parscale. And of course, that's because Parscale had hyped up this COVID rally in Oklahoma, which turned out to be pretty bad. So bad that Trump, he looked out into the nearly, it was only a couple thousand people that showed up, 6,000, I believe, 6,200 as an exact number, when it was supposed to be filled with 19,000 and then thousands more that were supposed to be in an overflow room. That's what they booked. And so Trump, when he looked out on the stage, and he saw all those empty seats, he's like, no, I'm not going to go out. He threw an absolute fit. And so that's why Kushner is now partly in charge of the Trump campaign, as well as everything else that he's doing. And that's because Donald Trump doesn't want to work. He doesn't want to do anything. And also the other reason is when Kushner inevitably messes it up because he's incompetent, Donald Trump still has someone to blame other than himself. And so it's that delegation of, responsibilities that Donald Trump loves to do because, again, he's lazy and he gets to blame other people. So congratulations, right? Now, there's one more thing. All of this has not stopped conservatives from coming up with conspiracy theories about Jared Kushner, which is pretty funny. They're accusing him, some at least, of being a Democratic plant. This is great. In fact, what is it? One person told Athy, quote, the depths and lengths Jared is going to stab Trump in the back are quite profound. Another says, Trump has been burned by Jared so many times. Look, here's the thing. Like, I really don't believe that Jared is some sort of Democrat plant, right? For one, that would make dinner very, very awkward because Donald Trump would be your father-in-law. I'm just saying, super awkward, right? So there's no need for conspiracies. I do err on the side of I believe that Jared Kushner is deeply, deeply incompetent. He's just dumb, and he's over his head. And the Trump family is also that dumb to put people like that in charge of very important things. Never underestimate stupid. I'm telling you guys, Trump is dumb. Kushner is dumb. It's not a conspiracy. It's just stupid. These two are going to try to bumble and fumble their way into what is likely going to be a landslide defeat because Donald Trump and Jared Kushner refuse to change their election strategy. They're still running with the 2016 playbook. Now, it's a completely different election than 2016. No longer are people looking for a radical change candidate. What they're looking for is a semblance to get back to normal, right? And a president that's going to bring them some semblance of normalcy. And that is really Joe, right now, Joe Biden, he's the definition of establishment. And so, yeah, there are people that are like, well, compared to the crazy that we're in today, yeah, I'd rather go back to that. As a progressive, I kind of disagree. I don't think we should stay here, but I think we need to progress. I think we need to go forward. But apparently the electorate at this point didn't quite agree. And so we're in the situation that we're in. And I think we got to get this guy out because he is dangerous because of how he's handled COVID-19, how the Republicans have handled COVID-19, as well as the calls for police reform, Black Lives Matter. And of course, coincidentally, that's why Donald Trump's polls are in the gutter right now. And yet, despite all this, as of now, Kushner's job appears to be safe. This, Athy writes, has caused conservatives to complain about having to deal with 4 more years of Jared should the president win a second term. That's assuming that Donald Trump rebounds from his bad polling, and that's not unheard of course, but and I'm not saying that anybody should let their guard down for this election, obviously, or take any of this for granted, right? But it's not looking good for Trump, and so it's possible that they're not really going to have to worry about that problem anymore, or at least for much longer. I know there's some comments here. Fernando G says, Kushner may not be dumb. He's just in over his head and tied his wagon to a total disaster. Oh, no. I've read stories where Kushner is also that dumb. Again, look at some of his investments that he's made. Not very smart. And look, like, okay, so you can be an ignorant person, right? And somebody who's just not knowledgeable about things. And that's fine. You can learn. You can always learn and better yourself and do better. But Kushner's got that cockiness about him that is very Trumpian. And so, again, numerous articles about who Kushner really is. I suggest that you guys read them to really get a window into who this guy really is. He is more Trump-like than I think a lot of people realize. All right. Moving on here, let's go to Trumpers abandoning ship. Because that's always fun. The rats are continuing to flee the ship as Donald Trump's poll numbers sink into the ground versus Joe Biden. So now one of these people is a hardcore or I should say was a hardcore Trump fan, named Mickey Kaus. So Mickey Kaus used to be a centrist Democrat, which kind of shows you how close centrist Democrats and Republicans really are. Now, this guy went from being a centrist Democrat to an anti-immigration activist and a Republican. And so he now believes that it is time for Republicans to dump Trump off the ballot. That's fun. Now, Kaus, who has been a dogged advocate of Donald Trump since the early days of the 2016 Republican primary, has now written an essay called A Time to Bail that says that the GOP would be better served at this point by removing the president from the ticket and running a less controversial candidate for the presidency. He said, quote, "It's undeniable at this point. Trump's falling behind and flailing. He's alienating white voters and not gaining enough of any other kind." So that is very interesting. Hardcore Trump allies saying, okay, that's it. Time to pull the chute. We're gone. Get out. Get out. So understand that this is different than the never Trump Republicans, right? So these never Trump Republicans, people like Bill Kristol, Rick Wilson, Steve Schmidt, those guys, right? And George Conway, of course, they're going to vote for Joe Biden, right? Because, they say, well, Trump's dangerous and we got to get rid of him, right? That's different than this guy. This guy agrees with Donald Trump's policies and had supported him, specifically when it comes to immigration, specifically when it comes to deporting people and building walls and the family separation, all that stuff. And so this guy, he is like Ann Coulter, essentially, right? Ann Coulter is, of course, anti-Trump now because Trump failed her when it came to being vicious to immigrants, right? Vicious to brown people. And so this is the same guy. And so he's like saying, pull the chute, get off the train. I've just mixed metaphors. I don't really care. The point is, again, he's leaving because Trump is an embarrassment and is going to lead to a lot more losses. And so, look, he's a vicious anti-immigrant Republican. He wants all the policies that Trump promised, but was unable to deliver because he's incompetent. And of course, there are opposition to that policies from the donors, of course, who keep it real, benefit from exploiting undocumented labor. And that's why they're against the pathway to citizenship, unlike Kaus, who writes that he is terrified that the Democrats are going to win and pass immigration reform that includes a pathway to citizenship. And so that's the thing, okay? He believes that a Democratic win will wipe out the Republican Party for decades. Fascinating. Maybe that wouldn't happen if if the Republicans weren't so vicious to immigrants. I mean, you think that maybe, if you actually agree with the policy of like, hey, let's do a pathway to citizenship, let's do this, let's not be vicious to immigrants, let's not separate them and put them in cages and their families, let's not do all that stuff. Maybe then we'll get some of the immigrant vote, because immigrants tend to actually, when they come over, work harder to establish themselves, and they build businesses and they do all that stuff. I mean, that's something that if conservatives actually held to their professed ideals, that would be something that would, I guess, conservatives should be in favor of. Okay. And they're not, because one linchpin of modern conservatism is racism, is xenophobia, is hatred. And so that's what they're doing. So now Kaus believes that taking Trump out of the equation would also give Republicans a better shot at keeping the White House. And he cites, of course, not a lot of enthusiasm for Joe Biden. Quote, "The Democratic Party, currently held together by antipathy to Trump, would lose its overriding purpose. The intensity level of the Dem campaign will instantly drop. Millions who might turn out to get rid of Trump will stay home." The lightning rod having wandered off with all the electricity, everything will probably become very boring very quickly. To that's actually not a bad prediction. That's not a bad analysis, right? Because there are some elements of truth to it. Joe Biden is not an exciting candidate. He doesn't excite the base. And this election is not about electing Joe Biden. It's a complete repudiation of Donald Trump. So the Democrats basically would put up anybody because anybody would have a better chance against Donald Trump than, of course, Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton back in 2016. Because in a lot of ways, you could argue that Joe Biden's actually worse than Hillary Clinton, but the mood has changed. Everything has shifted. And so the election landscape is far more different than it was in 2016. And that's why, of course, the old 2016 playbook is not effective anymore. Okay. And so if Donald Trump were to be either removed or if he were to quit, I mean, look, that would make the focus more on Joe Biden. He would have to get out of his bunker because both candidates have been hiding in their bunkers respectively, but none more than Joe Biden at this point because they're running the strategy of, well, just let Trump hang himself. I mean, we've already had 4 years of failure, and now we've got a pandemic, and now we've got all this stuff. All I have to do is just stay quiet and let Trump hang himself with his own rope, hoist himself on his own petard, right? The dotard on the petard. That's kind of clever. Anyway, I'm here all week. But anyway, look, that's the strategy from the Democrats. If you're going to get rid of Trump, then, well, you wouldn't have that strategy anymore. And you focus on Biden and you get all the negatives into Biden, the fact that he's not really progressive at all. And he's not really putting out like populist policy or anything like that. And well, that would be a problem. I'm not saying, of course, that would make Joe Biden lose. I think the Republican base would also suffer a similar problem if Trump were removed from the ballot. I mean, you would have low morale, low turnout, and I mean, it would be a pretty terrible election, pretty unexciting election. And I think there would be a lot of rage depending on how Trump would exit the ticket. And so Donald Trump has been laying the groundwork for a possible defeat to Joe Biden, which has led, of course, to rumors that, oh, no, Donald he's going to drop out. He's going to leave the ticket because he's going to take his ball and go home if it's shown, if he believes that he can't possibly win, because losing to him is the worst thing in the world. And so he's also claimed that it's rigged. And it's very possible that if Trump were pushed out, the base would turn on the rest of the Republican establishment because I can't believe you rigged it against Trump and then you shoved Trump out. They're going to turn on the Republican Party and then burn it down themselves, as opposed to, of course, Donald Trump dropping out, saying that it's rigged. That would still demoralize the base because who wants to vote in a rigged election, right? And so I think both situations would still lead to a Biden win. And so he's in some major problem, right? And again, Biden, his candidacy would lose steam. And again, it really depends on how this plays out. It's a lot of speculation here. But nonetheless, it's a referendum on Donald Trump. And without Trump, Biden loses his only strategy, which would force him to try to figure out a way, of course, to get voters. And this is, I think, where a Bernie Sanders candidacy would be really, really nice, right, in that situation. Well, I think in all situations, but again, I have a bias. I'm biased towards Bernie Sanders because he would energize voters instead of casting himself as not as bad as the other guy. Because we've had enough of those lesser of two evils, I'm not as bad as this guy elections. But again, speculation. But the fact that this is coming from Republican sources is really interesting, and as well as Trump allies. I mean, that makes it a little bit more real, as much speculation as it is. The original report of Trump dropping out, by the way, came from a Fox News source and other GOP Republican sources. I mean, and it was reported by Charles Gasparino. This is not some liberal. This is a pro-Trump ally of his. even reporting that this is a possibility. And so all that, I mean, it's pretty clear that Republicans are incredibly worried about the viability of Trump in this election, and that is real. The fear is real. All right. Let's go to Kayleigh McEnany.
Ask you maybe to defend why the president isn't necessarily reading his PDB when there are these types of issues that could arise.
The president does read, and he also consumes intelligence verbally. This president, I'll tell you, is the most informed person on planet Earth when it comes to the threats that we face.
Wow. That was White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany defending Donald Trump on his lack of reading intelligence reports by saying that he reads the intelligence reports, which he doesn't. All right, so now look, this is ridiculous in many different ways. Okay, first of all, Donald Trump is somebody who's got a very limited attention span. He's not a smart person. He gets bored easily. He doesn't read his briefings. He doesn't do any of that. Instead, he pays attention to killer maps and graphics. They had to shorten his briefings into bullet point segments with his name in it to keep his attention. He's a deeply vain and unintelligent person. Very lazy, corpulent, doesn't want to work, doesn't want to read. He just wants to go in front of his fans and talk. So the idea that, oh no, Donald Trump reads his intelligence briefings is absolutely hilarious and ridiculous. All right. So now what this whole situation is referring to is about the alleged Russian bounties in Afghanistan. So, there were intelligence reports where the Russian government was allegedly paying the Taliban, right, for bounties on American soldiers. And American soldiers have been killed in Afghanistan. Why the hell are we in Afghanistan anyway? We should get the hell out. We shouldn't even be there, right? And look, I kind of doubt the veracity of these reports. I've got my own reasons. I don't trust the CIA. I don't trust the NSA. I don't trust the FBI. Not very much anyway. For, of course, different reasons than Donald Trump. But nonetheless, that distrust is there. So, yeah, I take these reports with a grain of salt. That said, to think that Donald Trump sat down and read these reports is utterly ridiculous. So now what's even more interesting and a lot more fun is the hypocrisy, right? So McEnany comes out and says this, whereas a couple of days ago, President Trump retweeted a video of a man saying white power, right? And the defense from the White House is, well, he didn't sit and watch the video. And the defense from Ben Shapiro is even better. Watch.
President Trump, as we know, has the attention span of a gnat. Right? The president of the United States, he literally will not read presidential briefings that are put on his desk. They have to put them in bullet point form, and then he doesn't even read those. He'll ask for those to be shortened. Okay, the man is not famous for sitting there and reading tomes of Winston Churchill.
That's Ben Shapiro defending Trump by saying he doesn't read. As opposed to Kayleigh McEnany, who says, well, obviously Trump reads. That's how I'm defending him. Hilarious. Absolutely. This is so good. So good. I love it. Ridiculous. All right. So anyway, let's get to some substance before we get to more fun points. But I just wanted to show you that just the difference in those defenses based on the day. I mean, Kayleigh McEnany is doing a fantastic job because her job is to go out and lie and gaslight for Trump. She's everything that he's ever wanted in a press secretary. So now let's go to the substance here. As I said before, this is about Russia, right? And this is about Donald Trump not trusting or liking our intelligence agencies, which again, I understand, but the reason that he doesn't like it is because of the Mueller investigation, right? And look, because Trump, I know some of you are going to get mad when I say this, but I think that Donald Trump has financial interests in not making an enemy of Vladimir Putin, right? And so, yeah, does that mean that Donald Trump's in his pocket or any of the stuff that they're saying in Russiagate? No, that doesn't mean so at all. It just means I like Putin. He's loaned me money before, and so I don't want to make Putin mad, right? It's one of those things. Putin's my friend. He gives me money. And so, yeah. Now, when it comes to Donald Trump, is there likely some benefit for himself? Is he going to put himself over America? Oh, you goddamn right he will. That's what his entire presidency is about, making money off America. So, yeah, would I think that if this is true, and again, it hasn't been proven. I don't trust these intelligence agencies. But if this did turn out to be true, if we found some concrete evidence that he was letting this go, it's because there's a financial incentive for Donald Trump, or some sort of definitely not a political advantage, but some sort of monetary, I think, advantage. So that said, I'm skeptical, and I'm really kind of bummed out that there are mainstream journalists that are jumping on what essentially is stenography from these intelligence agencies. They're latching onto the reports, which haven't been verified by anybody outside the agency, who's admittedly not in favor of Donald Trump. But just because you're against Donald Trump or you don't like him, that doesn't make you an ally. It doesn't make you right. And it doesn't make what you're saying is true, even if you desperately want to use it against Donald Trump. And so to that, I say there's a lot of legitimate ways to attack Trump on stuff that we already know. And I would be very careful to take intelligence reports at face value without looking into it further. And of course, the biggest example of that is these intelligence agencies, the same ones that sold us the Iraq War, which was an unmitigated disaster. There were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And so a lot of these intelligence agencies have been agitating for wars in the Middle East. And they're part of the military-industrial complex. Doesn't mean I'm with Trump on this issue. It just means that I view everybody with suspicion because everybody's got their own monetary motives at play. That said, let's go into social media. They had a little bit of fun with this. One person says, consuming intelligence verbally is what stoners called snacking on edibles and talking horse shit. Explains a lot, to be fair. Well, I mean, true. Another one says, I'm pretty sure that consuming intelligence verbally can cause high blood pressure and other secondary infections. Please check with your doctor before beginning a course of verbal intelligence. Nice. Another one says, nothing hammers home the White House talking point that Joe Biden is old and confused, quite like insisting that their guy knows how to read. This is a press briefing, by the way, about whether or not the president can read and does read. How low is the bar at this point? It's got to be underground at this point. Way underground. Another one says, how can she not burst out laughing when she says Donald Trump is the most informed person on earth? Well, Kayleigh McEnany has trained very, very hard in order to do that, to be able to spew that kind of bullshit without being able to crack a smile or look, I know I couldn't do it. Yeah, let me be Trump's press secretary for a day. I will laugh my ass off. It would be great. Fun times. And then another says, the only way Trump would consume intelligence is if his staff told him it was Haagen-Dazs. That's, to be fair, that's a little body shaming, and I don't approve of that. But still fun. Another says, can you imagine being calling a press conference in 1 hour with the main talking point of being the president does read? And the rest is one more. Hearing he could also drink from a glass, but unconfirmed at this point. Yeah, man, look, I don't know what the whole thing is about Donald Trump not being able to drink from a glass. The whole thing is just pretty ridiculous. I'm just saying. All right. So I'm going to take a break here. I'm going to come back. I'm going to thank some patrons, read some super chats if there are any. hey, if you're there and you want to help out the show, super chat, and thank some channel members. And then we're going to get into how the Trump International Hotel has failed a hygiene check. Fun. Gross. We'll get into it. Stay right here around the nation.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
Welcome back to the show. Around the nation right here, TWT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. All right, so I want to thank some patrons here. So let's go to that. I want to thank Tyrone Wilson and David Alvarez. You can sign up to support independent progressive media by going to patreon.com/TWT Nation. I want to go and thank some channel members as well. Gregory Owens and Trevor Watson. I don't know if I said your names before, but thank you. If you want to sign up, you can hit the join button below to become a channel member. Let's see, super chats here. We just got one from, let's see, Kathy Harvey says like and share. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, moving on. Let's get into some gross shit. As coronavirus continues to spike in public places as states reopen, these places have been trying to maintain a more rigorous standard for keeping some things clean. So now some of the places obviously are restaurants and hotels. The hotel industry, of course, has been hit pretty hard by all this coronavirus stuff. So you would think that they would try really, really hard to make sure things are clean. Well, apparently they didn't. Inside Edition decided to test the cleanliness of several large hotels, and their results, of course, are nasty. So now they tested the Hampton Inn Times Square, the Hyatt Place Times Square, which is, by the way, owned by Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, is a Democrat, and the Trump International Hotel. It turns out that 2 of these hotels failed basic hygiene checks. And one of them, of course, is the Trump International. The other, of course, is the I believe, Hampton. Anyway, so to be fair, Inside Edition is a tabloid. Keep that in mind, right? So here's what they did. An Inside Edition correspondent for this thing would check into a room, print the program's logo on bed sheets, pillowcases, and towels using a washable spray that can only be seen under ultraviolet light. The correspondent would also use invisible gel to handprint other surfaces, as well as devices such as thermostats and remote controls. He would then make it appear if somebody had slept in the room, leave, and then rebook the room under another name the following night. So that was your methodology. It wasn't exactly scientific, but hey, you can tell if somebody cleaned the surface, right? You can tell if they washed or replaced the sheets or not. So there you go. It's fairly straightforward. You can't really mess that up. That said, Trump International, which overlooks Central Park and offers a personal protective equipment welcome kit, did change the bed sheets, but did not change the pillowcases and failed to wipe down the desks and the remote. Because, gross. A Salon reporter was able to verify with hotel management that the PPE welcome kits include a pair of masks, gloves, and sanitizing materials, but apparently they could not be asked to replace a pillowcase. Gross. Like, you put your head on that. That's nasty. I mean, and if you watch TV, by the way, you're also touching your remote, which you don't know, like, what the last person who touched that remote had touched before that. I mean, hotel porn, anyone? All right, anyway, gross is nasty. Not bed bug nasty, but still nasty, right? So now, when Inside Edition revealed the results of this sting, a hotel spokesperson accused the program of fake news. I'm not kidding. Quote, following an internal review, we have concluded that the claims made by Inside Edition are categorically false. So basically, hey man, this, we investigated ourselves and we found that we did nothing wrong. Everything was perfect. Okay, well, how do you explain the fact that there's still that gel on the desks and the phone, and the fact that it's the same, like that spray is still on the pillowcase, like that was supposedly used, right? It's not like, oh, we took the pillowcase, we wash it, and we replace it with the same pillowcase. That's not how that works in the hotel industry. No, you strip everything. You take it to get washed. And then you don't always return it to the same room. No. And so, no, they got caught red-handed under the UV light. Gross. And then to come out and say, well, fake news. Super gross. I mean, it's shocking that the Trump Hotel would miss out on something like that. And by shocking, I mean, I don't actually mean that it shocks me at all. Sarcastic comment. But anyway, look, that's it. The Trump Hotel actually didn't do the worst. Actually, it was a Hyatt Place Times Square that was owned by the Pritzker family. So to show that this is not like, oh, Donald Trump, terrible manager. No, he's supposed to divest from his businesses and not actually supposed to run them. And look, by the way, I mean, I can't really blame Donald Trump for this specifically. I mean, yes, he sets the culture from the top, or he did set the culture from the top when he was running it. But I think this is more of like a local management issue. And so local management probably is like, hey, let's cut corners. Let's cut staff because we're losing money. They've lost about $1 billion in total from coronavirus. And so, yeah, they're cutting corners and they're not cleaning as much as they're supposed to be. And so probably cut back on staff as well because, again, they're losing money and they want to make money. And so that's the problem, right? And now Pritzker, probably the same thing. In fact, what happened at that Hyatt Place was actually worse. Apparently, the sheets and the pillowcase still showed the logo and the gel was apparently on the remote. So they didn't touch the sheets or the pillowcase or the remote. They didn't do anything. Disastrous. And again, super gross. But to be fair, their response was a little bit better. They didn't call it fake news, for one. A Hyatt spokesperson told the program the company was, quote, deeply concerned about the situation described, as it is not representative of Hyatt's rigorous enhanced cleaning protocols that have been deployed globally due to COVID-19. Better response, but actually they did worse than the Trump hotel. So that is pretty interesting. It really does make me reevaluate hotels, by the way, because if they're not cleaning like this, the way that they should be during coronavirus, just imagine what they normally do. Gross. Gross. All right. Let's move on to one more story here, and it's good news. So we have some good news in Oklahoma. It appears that voters, via a ballot initiative, have actually voted to expand Medicaid to the state's residents. Now, this happened again during a night of primaries with some mixed results. For example, John Hickenlooper defeated progressive Andrew Romanoff by a fairly large margin. Hickenlooper, that's the guy who drank fracking fluid. And he also said, I really wouldn't make a good senator. Well, yeah, apparently. And yet you still got, convinced into running for this seat. So now you got to take on Cory Gardner. So now not only do you have Hickenlooper winning, but you also have, of course, Amy McGrath beating Charles Booker by a very razor-thin margin. And so that sucks. Amy McGrath, of course, is supposed to take on Mitch McConnell. And basically, the people of Kentucky have just made sure that Mitch McConnell is going to win another 4 years. Anyway, that said, shouldn't focus on the negatives because there's a great positive here because it's a big win for the people of Oklahoma. So let me go to how the vote went. With all precincts reporting on Tuesday, State Question 802, which asked voters to expand Medicaid, passed by 6,488 votes. And so, as you're going to see, this is a situation where it is rural versus urban. Now, there's a slim majority, right? But the voters not only expanded Medicaid, but also enshrined it in Oklahoma state constitution. That means the people who voted for this were very, very clear in their message. This is the will of the people, and you're not going to touch it. You're not going to get to mess with it. You can't do anything. Passing it in this way prevents Oklahoma's GOP-controlled legislature and Republican governor from limiting or undoing this expansion. So it is there to stay. It is there to stay. Now, I have a quote here from Yes on 802 campaign manager Amber England, who said this, quote, in the middle of a pandemic, Oklahomans stepped in and delivered life-saving care for nearly 200,000 of our neighbors, took action to keep our rural hospitals open, and brought our tax dollars home to protect jobs and boost our local economy. So I love how they got this done. It was people-led, not politician-led, which is the way all movements should be. According to the Oklahoman, the campaign for SQ 802 was launched after years of legislative inaction on the Medicaid expansion. Republicans, of course, didn't want to expand Medicaid. In fact, you still have people in Oklahoma, the mostly Republican-controlled, again, legislature and governor, that are saying, oh, great, now we have to expand health care to people, and we can't afford to do it. I mean, we're going to have to cut other things. But I'll get to that in a minute. Now, the Yes on 802 campaign turned in a record number of signatures to qualify this question for the ballot. And again, these were people mainly in urban areas. In rural areas, they generally tended to reject it. 70 of the state's 77 counties, mostly rural, actually rejected the proposal. This led John Tidwell, state director of Americans for Prosperity, and chairman of the Vote No on 802 Association, to say this, to basically point out that there was no widespread support, which, again, is a ridiculous talking point. Let me get to his quote. Results are clear. A plan that claims to save rural health care was overwhelmingly rejected by rural communities across Oklahoma. Voters in more than 90% of Oklahoma counties voted against SQ 802. Well, that's because there's like 5 people living in those counties. Okay, a little bit of an exaggeration, but you have most of the voters that are concentrated in city areas. That's where most of the people live. And most of the people said, yes, let's do Medicaid for the poorest Oklahomans. This is not a difficult question. Yes, we would like them to have health care. And as far as rural voters are concerned, why did they turn against this? It's because I believe, and maybe I'm wrong, but they're convinced to vote against their own self-interests by people like Tidwell and the Republican Party and all the corporate-funded news. They want to give tax cuts to corporations and the wealthy instead of providing health care to their constituents. Governor Kevin Stitt also said that expanding Medicaid is not practical. Oh, it costs the state too much money. Oh, it's funny because a lot of other states, I believe 36, seem to have been able to expand Medicaid without too much of a problem. Weird. But he said, quote, you either pay for it by reducing roads and bridge funding, education funding, and public safety funding, or you raise taxes. And as your governor, I'm not raising taxes. Oh, okay. So basically screw every one of these other programs to fund Medicaid to get people to, of course, resent voting in favor of Medicaid. And that's what that situation is. That's exactly what he's doing, saying, hey, man, look, I'm going to have to defund these other things. But in reality, he actually had the choice to not do either. Earlier this year, Stitt vetoed the funding mechanism for his plan to expand Medicaid. The funding did not necessitate a tax increase or any cuts to state agencies. So he could have done this without doing any of that and still gave 200,000 Oklahomans Medicaid. But he decided, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not interested. I don't want people in my state to get health care, to get health insurance through the government. I don't believe in that at all. And that's gross. At their core, Republicans do not want poor people to get health insurance. So he's an absolute gross person and a liar, because he lied about this entire thing as well. I mean, they'd rather people go with no insurance than go through the state. Now, of course, if you don't have insurance, that actually makes health outcomes worse. And when people, and this really does affect Medicare and Social Security later on in life, because if you go through your life without insurance and you develop these chronic conditions because you can't get them treated before they become disastrously expensive chronic conditions, then you're costing the system actually more money in the long run. But then again, that benefits Republicans as well, because they want to shut down Medicare and they want to shut down Social Security. So really, it's a pretty well thought out plan to not only deny people health care throughout most of their lives, but also rip it away from seniors. And so, like I said before, gross people, absolutely the worst. So now there's more here. Amber England has got a quote. She tells the paper, quote, I think the governor doesn't have a very good memory. He just had an agreement with the Hospital Association and the legislature to fund it this year without raising taxes. What's wasteful is leaving $1 billion on the table every single year that we could have been bringing home to invest in our communities and providing health care to our folks, which, of course, is the very people who need this the most. So I want to give you another quote here from one of the voters, one of the people who actually said yes to it, that I had a little bit of a problem with. Now, this is Edmond voter Christine McIntyre. She said that she voted for SQ 802 because of her son's difficulties in getting health care. Well, that's great. This is what Medicaid is for, right? To help people who are poor, who are struggling to get health care. She said, I have mixed feelings about it, though. Part of me would vote no, but I have an adult son that makes borderline poverty that doesn't qualify for Medicaid, and he doesn't have health insurance. Because he doesn't have health insurance, it affects his family and upsets me. So I voted for it, even though personally, I probably wouldn't have. I don't know how I would say no. Well, look, she did the right thing, obviously, and you can tell that she's being pretty honest about it because she has a mixed feeling. But I think this is indicative, I think, of the average Republican voter, the kind of people that don't like government programs until it affects them personally and they need those programs. In this case, it's her son that needs it. That's a family member who has their own family and they're suffering and they need health care. And I get it. Nobody wants their families to suffer. Of course. The thing is, I don't just care about my family. I care about everybody's family. I care about your family. I'm one of those people who are willing to fight for a person that I don't know, whose plight shouldn't affect me personally, and it doesn't impact my life, but it also does. Knowing about these people, knowing that people are suffering without health care, that makes me upset. Bernie Sanders put it perfectly. He was talking, this is in context to his beliefs, but he said this: when others suffer, it affects me. That's my spirituality. I mean, nothing really encapsulates the phrase "not me, us" better than that. I hope we do get to a place where we all fight for each other, for fellow Americans as well. And that said, this is really good news for the 200,000 people who will ultimately benefit from this. And not to mention anybody who loses their job as a result of, for example, the pandemic. Now 40 million people unemployed, losing their employer-sponsored insurance. I'm sure there are hundreds or tens of thousands of those people that are in Oklahoma that are losing their jobs as a result of this. And at least now they can continue to have some form of health care until they get themselves, back on their feet. And that's a good thing. At the end of the day, it's the right thing to do. I'm very, very proud for, of Oklahoma voters for doing it. All right. That's it. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me. Please like and share the stream, subscribe, become a patron or a channel member, all that different stuff. Thank you so much for watching. Come back tomorrow, same time, same place, same channel, 3 p.m. Eastern, right here, TYT Nation. Thank you. And remember, love you guys. And change begins with you. Good night, Nation. See you guys later.
Please clap.
Mike Pounds.
Wait. You're getting nervous, man.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.